New York City, a concrete jungle where millions come to find themselves, but most end up losing their souls. To the world, Derek was the ultimate success story. At 32, he stood at the absolute pinnacle of the tech industry, a titan of Wall Street whose every move was tracked by Forbes and every word was analyzed by investors. He lived in a $60 million penthouse in the heart of Manhattan, where the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of a kingdom he had conquered. He owned the fastest cars, wore the finest Italian silk, and flew across the globe in a private jet that felt more like a home than any house he'd ever owned. But behind the closed doors of his glass fortress, the reality was hauntingly different. The air in his penthouse felt thin, almost unbreathable. He was surrounded by expensive art that held no meaning and high-end furniture that felt cold against his skin. Every morning, he would wake up to 3 different phones buzzing with crises that only he could solve. And every night, he would return to a silence so heavy it felt like it was crushing his chest. He realized that he had spent his entire life running a race that had no finish line. He had accumulated more wealth than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, yet he couldn't buy a single minute of genuine peace. He looked at the people in his life, the colleagues who flattered him, the friends who only showed up for the parties, and the women who loved his status more than his soul. He was the American dream personified, yet he felt like a hollow shell. The golden cage wasn't made of iron bars. It was built with stock options, luxury contracts, and the relentless pressure to stay on top. Last night, as the city lights flickered like distant stars below him, the most powerful man in the room realized he was also the loneliest man in the world. The Lion of Wall Street was finally tired of the hunt, and for the first time, he let the tears fall, realizing that his greatest success had become his greatest failure. The silence in his penthouse was louder than the roar of the city 50 floors below. Derek stood in the center of his vast, minimalist living room, looking at a collection of awards and trophies that now felt like gravestones. He realized that the man in the mirror was a stranger, a polished, professional mask with nothing left behind the eyes. The decision didn't come with a bang. It came with a quiet, devastating clarity. He walked to his mahogany desk and picked up his smartphone, the device that held his entire empire. With a steady hand, he placed it on the marble counter and turned it off. No more board meetings, no more billion-dollar mergers, no more fake handshakes. He went to his walk-in closet, past the rows of custom-tailored suits and handmade shoes, and reached for an old, faded backpack he hadn't touched in a decade. He packed only the essentials: a few plain shirts, a worn-out pair of jeans, and a book he'd been meaning to read for 5 years. He left his gold watch, his black titanium credit cards, and the keys to his $7 million car collection on the kitchen island. As he stepped out of the elevator for the last time, the doorman tipped his hat, calling him Sir, a title Derek never wanted to hear again. He walked past his waiting limousine and kept walking until he reached the Port Authority bus terminal. Amidst the crowd of travelers, he was just another face, just another soul looking for a way out. He bought a one-way ticket to a small town in the mountains of Montana, a place where his name meant nothing and his net worth meant even less. As the bus pulled out of the station and the skyline of Manhattan began to shrink in the distance, Derek felt a strange, terrifying sensation. Freedom. For 15 years, he had been the master of the universe. But as he leaned his head against the cold bus window, he realized he was finally becoming the master of himself. The lion had not just escaped the cage, he had set the cage on fire. The mountain air of Montana was sharp and cold, a brutal contrast to the climate-controlled skyscrapers of Manhattan. Derek found himself in a town so small, it didn't even have a traffic light. He took a job at a local carpentry shop, working for an old man who didn't care about tech stocks or quarterly earnings. For the first time in his life, Derek's hands weren't tapping on a keyboard. They were covered in sawdust and blisters. His days were no longer measured by profit margins, but by the smell of fresh cedar and the steady rhythm of a hand saw. He lived in a small, one-bedroom cabin that cost less than the monthly maintenance fee of his old penthouse. There were no assistants to wake him up, no lawyers to defend him, and no cameras to track his every move. At night, instead of staring at a glowing screen, he sat on his porch and watched the stars, realizing that they were brighter than any neon sign in Times Square. He discovered that a simple meal of bread and soup tasted better than any 5-course dinner at a Michelin star restaurant when you actually have an appetite for life. One evening, the shop owner asked him why a man with his education was sanding wood for $10 an hour. Derek looked at his calloused hands, then at the quiet forest surrounding them, and simply smiled. He told him that for 15 years, he had been building things that didn't exist for people he didn't like. Now, he was building something he could touch, for a reason he could finally understand. He wasn't the Lion of Wall Street anymore. He was just Derek, a man who had traded a mountain of gold for a grain of peace. He had spent his youth chasing a ghost, only to find the truth in the silence of the mountains. He had finally learned that the richest man isn't the one who has the most, but the one who needs the least. The peace Derek had built was shattered on a Tuesday afternoon when a black SUV, completely out of place in this dusty mountain town, pulled up to the carpentry shop. Out stepped Marcus, Derek's former business partner, a man still trapped in the world of high-stakes greed. Marcus looked at Derek's dirt-stained jeans and his calloused hands with a mixture of pity and confusion. He told Derek that the company was failing, that the board was in a panic, and that they were offering him $100 million just to return for 1 year. "You're living like a beggar, Derek," Marcus said, gesturing to the small wooden stool Derek was carving. "You could own the world again. Why are you wasting your life in the dirt?" Derek didn't look up immediately. He finished the curve of the wood, wiped the sweat from his brow, and finally looked Marcus in the eye. He didn't see a powerful executive. He saw a man who was drowning in a sea of numbers. Derek picked up a handful of sawdust and let it fall through his fingers, telling Marcus that he used to count his life in dollars, but now he counts it in heartbeats. He told him that in New York, he was a king who couldn't sleep, but here, he was a commoner who woke up with a smile. Marcus offered him the contract, but Derek didn't even look at the pen. He told Marcus that the tragedy of success is that most people spend their whole lives building a ladder, only to realize at the very end that it was leaning against the wrong wall. As the SUV drove away, leaving a cloud of dust behind, Derek went back to his work. He wasn't interested in owning the world anymore because he had finally found something much more valuable. He had found himself. The lion had no desire to return to the cage, no matter how much gold was used to plate the bars. He was finally, truly wealthy, not because of what was in his bank account, but because of the peace in his soul. Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. Don't spend your life climbing the wrong ladder. If you want more stories that challenge your perspective and fuel your growth, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. The cage is open. The choice to stay or leave is yours. Thanks for watching.